Do Perek Zayin of Mishlei tonight. We're going to do the entire chapter. Even though there are many Pesukim, we're going to do the whole thing because most of the Perek is very much focused on one topic. Even though he gives a few brief introductions to the Perek. What you will hear in this Perek is very significant because he's going to be speaking about one of the most dangerous temptations that exist out there, and it's called a woman. And we've spoken briefly about it because this idea is interspersed everywhere. Many ideas that are expressed, many points are made. But what's interesting about Perek Zayin, it's very, very detailed. He went out and tried to investigate how this temptation works. How does a human being actually fall into this trap? What makes him fall into this trap? How the most powerful of men historically and statistically have fallen in this trap, how the most innocent are deceived by those women, the bad women of course, and what one can do to protect himself. So therefore, even though he will speak about it from time to time, and he will mention this point, how one should be careful and maintain a distance, in this Perek he actually analyzes this whole thing, how does this happen? And this is how he begins. Beni, shemor amarai u'mitzvotai titzpon itach. My son, keep my words and preserve my commandments with you. In other words, the commentators explain, don't ridicule anything that is being said here, even though it has been said before. He's not repeating himself. It's only for greater emphasis. What is being said here is of utmost importance. Therefore, pay close attention to it. And don't underestimate what is being said here. Don't say, oh, this won't happen to me, this doesn't apply to me, and so forth. Now, what's the best advice for preserving these proverbs, these lessons with you? Titzpon. Titzpon means try to memorize them. In other words, many of these sayings, because people have heard them so much, they have memorized them. Anything that we repeat, anything that we review a lot, we know it by heart. And if we know something by heart, it's a part of us, and we tend to identify with it perhaps a little bit better. So it says one way to learn these lessons is titzponitach, is preserve this information with you, memorize them. So like this you can point to a situation as it arises. Oh, this is what he meant. This is what the rabbis meant. As I pointed out 2 weeks ago, in the area of finances, when it comes to a loan, a situation when you're being asked to co-sign a loan, how you should stay away from it. People who never learned Mishlei would think, oh, what's the big deal of co-signing? I'm doing the guy a favor, he's a friend of mine. Yeah. Well, if you haven't heard that lesson, hear lesson number 12. It's available on tape, of what the problems can be when somebody co-signs. So therefore, don't underestimate, don't think this doesn't apply. It's very, very relevant. What was relevant back then is very relevant today too. En chadash tachat hashemet, as he says elsewhere, there's nothing new under the sun. People are the same. Perhaps today we use cars instead of horse and buggies, things like that, but humanity really hasn't changed. We still have barbaric people today, not just during Genghis Khan's time. You have people who are very cruel, and all the problems that existed then exist today too. Shemor mitzvotai v'hyeh v'torati kishon einecha. The translation here is keep my commandments and live, and my Torah like the apple of your eye, which I think is like the pupil of the eye. In other words, listen and preserve my commandments and you will live. Here the idea is even at time of danger. There were many times where the Jewish people were exposed to great dangers, whether they were threatened with expulsion or with worse, being killed during the Spanish Inquisition and other times in history, or during the time that the Romans decreed many decrees to stop the Jewish people from observing the mitzvot, from studying the Torah. Even at those times, shemor mitzvotah, and you will live. Even though it appears that you're putting yourself in danger, nevertheless, fulfill the mitzvot and you will survive. What it means over here is the Jewish nation. There needs to be a continuous link to Sinai, and therefore we can't just give up so easily. Depending on the circumstances, there are certain mitzvot that we need to give our life for them. If we are asked to kill someone, another Jew, and so forth, to bow down to an idol, there are 3 cardinal sins. But even if they're not the cardinal sins, if it's during the time of Shmad, The time of Shimoda is during the time when they tried to convert us as a whole, as a nation, as a people. We were supposed to give our life for just anything. And this is important in order that we not give the idea to any Jew who's out there that it's okay to give in as soon as the pressure intensifies, as soon as it becomes too difficult. Because that's what happened in this country. Many Jews came over and said, oh, I have to work on Saturday to make a living, otherwise I won't get a job. And many of them threw away the Shabbat, unfortunately. It was only those who knew the importance of Shabbat, that was priority number one and not their livelihood, that did not give up their Shabbat. And because of that, their children and grandchildren are probably still Jewish and did not assimilate. So we don't give in under any pressures. Even if things are tough, Shmor mitzvotai v'chyeh, and you will live. There's a famous mashal that Rabbi Kin gave with fish in the water. The fish in the water are swimming around very, very fast. And the fox goes over to them and, where are you running? Why are you not calm? Don't you see that the men are trying to catch us with their net? So the fox says, I have a great idea. Why don't you come and live with me here on land, in dry land, just like our forefathers did once upon a time. And the fish turned to the fox, you are the fox that they say that you're smart. You're a fool. If we are in danger here in the water from being trapped, the more so if we come to dry land. We can't survive without water. That is what Rabbi Kin told Papus. Papus saw Rabbi Kin teaching Torah, disseminating Torah, even though there was a danger of him being caught and sent to prison or worse, killed, as happened to him in the end. Aren't you afraid, Papus tells him? He says, if we don't learn Torah, we're in great danger, in big danger. So if now we're in danger, what do we have to lose? We would be in greater danger if we don't learn Torah. If we're learning Torah and we're in danger, there's nothing we can do about it. Only Hashem can help us. But to voluntarily not learn Torah, that is even a greater threat to the Jewish people. And sometimes life is tough. People do not have time to learn Torah because they really have a tight schedule. But you have to remember, this is priority number one. We can't do without it. One can listen to a cassette tape on his way to work these days. There's a lot of things that one can do to make up for some class that he missed. It's like oxygen to us. The reason he compares it to the apple of our eye, Kishon Ha'ain, is because the eye is important. It illuminates our way. Even when things are dark, it shows us the way. And that's why the Torah is important to us as a guide. Plus that the eye is the pupil of the eye is protected by the apapaim, by the eyebrows in English. Eyelids, by the eyelids, right? From any dust. I pointed to the eyebrows, but I meant they're protected by the eyelids, right? So in the same way, the Torah needs protection. We require siyagim in order that we don't come to transgress anything. One has to put up siyagim. The rabbis put up several siyagim, several fences for us in order that we don't fall. Just like I've given in the past example of where there's a major construction site, you don't want to get hurt, they put up signs of hard hats, they put up a fence, they don't want to get sued for exposing you to danger. So the Torah was aware that the human being is frail and we all have certain weaknesses and we can fall, and therefore the Chachamim were given the authority to set up fences. In other words, it's not an additional mitzvah, it's not a change in the mitzvah, it's just to protect the Torah. Rabbis tell us in this pasuk, Shmor mitzvotai v'chyeh, that is the message that the malach, the angel, gives the little baby right before it exits the mother's womb. Remember the Torah that I taught you while you were in the mother's womb? Remember it, study it, because by studying it, you will live. Next pasuk, Koshrem al ezbeotecha kotvem al luach libecha. We've seen this pasuk before, similar pasuk. Bind them on your fingers, write them on the tablet of your heart. In other words, the Torah and mitzvot is something that we do b'machshava, dibur and ma'aseh, with our thought, with our speech, and with our actions. It's not just good, and it's not just enough to be a Jew at heart, like some say, I have a good heart. Mitzvot, to be Jewish, requires actions. Certain actions need to be performed. Jewish life is not only just words, and it's not only thoughts. It's important to have a good heart, obviously, but it requires actions, daily action. And to bind them, the commentators explain what does it mean to bind them on our fingers. There are mitzvot that we do with our hands, and as we do them, we should think what we're doing. For example, let's say we're doing something as mundane as plowing the field. But in plowing the field, we can think about the mitzvot that have to do with the field. For example, I cannot plow using a donkey and an ox together. When I'm cutting the field, harvesting the field, I can think about the mitzvot of living over the edge to the poor. When I'm kneading the dough, I can think of the mitzvah of Afrashat Challah. So as you're performing these mundane activities, the simple activities, you can think of the mitzvot. You can time to your fingers. In other words, as you are preoccupied even with mundane things, you can think of, oh, how does this relate to me? How is this important to the Torah? How is this associated with the mitzvah and so forth? The next pasuk is Emor la chokhmah achotiat umoda la bina tikra. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your kinswoman. In other words, your relative. What that means is one sister, there's a natural kirva, there's a natural bond, a natural closeness between one and one sister, right? And this closeness should never part. In other words, hopefully a brother and sister will remain very close forever. This is the way one should treat the chokhmah in the Torah. There should be a natural bond, a natural closeness. We're Jewish, this is ours. And I wish I would not have to repeat it, but that's what comes to my mind, that one of the ministers of Egypt once said about the secular Israelis, I'm amazed at you, he says. I don't know of any other culture, any other nation, any other people who's not proud of their heritage like you guys. You guys are not even proud. You cast away everything. You don't believe in anything. I don't know of any other culture. Everybody usually is proud of their cultures and of their heritage. And you? It was, in a sense, a Hilul Hashem. Imagine him. Even Arabs have been known to express amazement when they were in jail at some of the Israeli Soharim, the ones in charge of the cell of the prison, the guards, I guess they're called. You know, isn't it Pesach right now? Then why are you eating a pita? They say, why are you eating a bita? You know, they can't say the feet. Why are you eating bita? So isn't it Pesach? You're not supposed to eat hametz. You know, so it's, unfortunately, but I want to speak positively about them. They didn't grow up with it. They probably were deprived of any education. It's not their fault. They don't do it intentionally. So at least that's a limud zechut on them. They don't know. There are very few people in our history who knew and intentionally did not want to keep the mitzvah. They simply did not grow up with it. The Kadosh Baruch Hu should help them that they should do teshuvah shelema. And one of these days they will. Many of them are already doing teshuvah. So we have hope for them. But initially, it's unfortunate, it's sad that a goy should be able to express himself, to observe something like that. So this love, or this closeness, the relationship between a brother and a sister is natural. So should our affinity and our attachment to the Torah, to this Chumash. We should want to learn this. We should want to know this. On the words, Umoda la bina tikra, the rabbis tell us that Ena Torah niknet ella besimanim. In other words, moda, in other words, to become familiar and acquainted with the Torah, you want to make simanim. Simanim means shortcuts, abbreviations, in order that you're able to remember a lot of the halachot. And you will see many halachot, whether you find them in the Siddur or in the Shulchan Aruch or elsewhere, abbreviations in the Gemara. L'olam ilmad adam derech tzara. Try to learn the shortcut way, so that you help yourself remember, or you help the students who you are teaching to remember the lesson better. So the idea here is to make simanim. And there's all sorts of simanim that we find even in the Haggadah of Pesach, with the makot, all sorts of simanim. Simanim means signs or symbols, how to remember something that we do not forget. There are many examples. I'm sure you've seen some of them, either in abbreviation or as some other siman to remember an entire chapter or to remember a particular halakha. Okay, now we've come to the big lesson over here. All of this was an introduction, the importance of remembering all of this, and how would all this help you? So we're going back to a familiar concept, but here he's going to talk about it in detail. And that is called Lishmorcha Misha Zara Minochriya Amarea Ehlika. So that they may keep you, the Torah, from a strange woman, from the stranger, with her smooth words. So we're talking about the temptations and the seduction of a woman who's after you. But we're also, the commentators say, we're also talking about any temptation or seduction attempted by Umot Haolam, by the nations of the world, to try to lure one to become a Christian, or Islam. And they've tried everything And they're still trying today in all sorts of places in the world and in this country and in Israel too. There are missions. They spend a lot of money to try to lure especially the poor Jews, or the Jews that don't know anything, that have come from Russia, to convert. They even wear a kippah on their head. You see, I'm just like you. All you got to do is believe in him, in who? In Yeshu. Otherwise we're the same. You could wear your tzitzit, you could wear your kippah, just believe in the guy. And if you don't believe, you're not saved. In other words, they threaten you too. But they really try everything they can, even with money. And it's a big problem. And unfortunately, the Israeli government is not putting a stop to this, even though it's so open. In the name of democracy, I guess. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But this is the Jewish nation. Unfortunately, they don't see that yet. They think it's a multi-race land where everybody is entitled to live by his God and by his truth, by his faith. But hopefully that will stop very soon. So one has to be careful with all this seduction, with all these attempts being made by all sorts of influences to lure one. And how will one protect himself? The best protection is only through the Torah. The Torah does not only give one intelligence to prepare one with the right answers to confront these people, but as I said in the past, the Torah is compared to a powerful light which gives one two kinds of protection, one from calamities and one from the Yetzer Hara. Even after one leaves this shiur, he has recharged his spiritual batteries, and he's strong enough, or he's stronger, to confront the Yetzer Hara than he was before he entered the shiur. What he's trying to tell us over here is will be to our benefit to defend us from these women, because there are women out there who will initiate. In other words, they will look for you. You won't even have to look for them. Next pasuk, Ki b'chalon beti be'adesh nabi nishkafti. For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice. They both mean very similar. Halon and eshnab are both windows, or eshnab is a small opening. I've looked through the window of my home. What is he talking about? He's saying that this is a fact. This problem of strange women, or women trying to lure one, is a common problem. It has always existed. Isn't that what they say in English, that this is the oldest profession? Prostitution, they call it the oldest profession, something like that. Yeah. Well, that's what he's saying. In other words, I've looked out from my window. In other words, it's clear that this is a problem that's been around, and it's right outside my window, meaning it's very common. It's there for you to see. Wherever you go, it's there. Another interpretation is ki b'chalon beti, with my mind, with the clarity of my mind, I've used the chokhmah to analyze, to observe all the situation, and I've seen and I've noticed how there's a tremendous machshelah here. There's a tremendous machshelah. I guess machshelah in English we would say room for falling. In other words, one can easily trapped, that one can easily fall. This is one area that many can easily fall, and what's worse than that is that avera goreret avera, one sin leads to another sin. And this is how he begins his analysis. Vayre bapetaim avina babanim nar hasar lev. I was looking at the simple ones. I was looking at the youth, a young man void of understanding. So he's looking at those individuals who are simple, and he's looking at the youth, the teenagers. He's paying attention. He's trying to analyze what they are doing wrong, or where is it that they're going, and how is it that they're falling into this trap. And what does he notice? Now he begins to tell us every little detail. He says, first of all, I noticed the following. Over bashuk etzel pinach v'derech betach itzad. I noticed that this young man, or the young men, or the ones who are simple meaning that they're not too smart, they don't realize what they're doing. They're passing through the street near her corner. In other words, they're the ones that initiate, they're the ones that are asking for trouble by getting too close to trouble. And he went the road to her house. Meaning what? She didn't start, they're the ones that started. Now what did we say a couple times ago? That in the Kriyat Shema we say, Lo taturu achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem, don't go after what your heart desires and what after your eyes see. And the question is, but wait a minute, usually the agents of sin are the eyes. The eyes see, and once they see, then the body does what it does. Then why does it say, don't go after your heart, what your heart desires? It should say first after what your eyes see. If your eyes saw, then they will desire to do whatever it is. But the answer is, if the heart would not desire first, if it would not have the curiosity, then it would not lead the eyes to see. So it all begins in the heart. Even though it's true that the eyes occasionally see something, and all of a sudden they become interested, but it all begins with the heart. If the heart would not show any interest, if it would not be curious, then it would not go and see, well, what's going on there, let me see. And there are a lot of people who are nosy, who are curious, and eventually they get themselves into trouble. So here we have, he says that he sees the young men, the way they get themselves into trouble is that they initiate, they get too close, they're curious, and as they get close, that's where the trouble begins. Because then she sees, this woman sees that they're getting close, and then she takes action. B'neshef be'erev yom be'ishon laila va'afela. In the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. At all times, when does this happen a lot, or most? In the evening hours at night. Why is that? At night, there are less people in the street. Because there's less people, one may think that no one will see him. Because one may think in the back of his mind that nobody will observe, his tava, his desires, are intensified. And these women are there at those times too, which therefore shows a lack of modesty for anybody who's around those hours of the night by themselves. For the women I'm talking about. This is not a time for them to be just running around by themselves. It's suspicious. What happens after he has gotten too close? V'hinei isha likrato, shidzona unsurat lev. Behold, there all of a sudden he meets up with a woman dressed as a prostitute. Unsurat lev. Unsurat lev means with a heart which is impudent in a sense. Very forceful. Now this is important because it talks about women who are not dressed modestly. V'hinei isha likrato shidzona means that she dresses like a prostitute or she behaves like one. Am Yisrael always put an emphasis on our dress code, and that means two things. The Jewish people were always identified by their names, were Jewish names. Our name is not Bernard. Our name is not Eugene. It's not even, what's another Irish name? Sean. Exactly. We have beautiful names that we need to be proud of. We need to be identified by those names, by our dress code. We all used to look Jewish. Until the suit and tie came around, and even Prime Minister of Japan wears no more kimono, or the kimono even though that's for the women, but he does not wear the Japanese dress anymore. Everybody wears a suit and a tie. But the reality is a Jew should look Jewish in his dress code, in his name, and in the language that he uses. That was one idea of our dress code. The other idea was the tzniut, especially for the women, to dress properly. Because even if a woman does not intend to do anything wrong, by not wearing something modestly, she can be causing a man to sin. And once she comes upstairs and you show her a whole list of sins, and she says, well, I didn't do this. Oh, yes, you did, because you caused all these people to look at you. And this led to all sorts of problems, because one was not dressed properly. But that's what this country is doing today. They came up with a term called dress to kill. Yes. And that's what they do, is they kill. They kill the men. That's the whole idea. And they put it in the billboards. Even if all it is a car, all it is a Mercedes-Benz or whatever it is, but they have to put a naked woman on top of it, because otherwise they won't look at the car. So they know the mentality of these people in this generation, that people like looking at these things. They don't care if they get into an accident in the middle of the way. Just look. Yeah? And this is how they sell their cars, this is how they sell everything. Even something simple like a recipe book. The women are not dressed modestly. Just about anything. In the newspaper. Everything is not modest. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, these things were not as common. I don't remember these things when I was younger. Even in the radio, we didn't hear the words we hear today. It's incredible. They take the liberty to say anything. So here's this woman that comes to greet him, or towards him, Shidzonaun Surat Lev, with not dressed properly and very impudent in her heart. Rabbis tell us a Jewish woman, Kol Kebuda Bat Melech Penima. A Jewish woman, a true Jewish girl, is more reserved in her nature. She spends more time at home. There's a lot of work to, whether she's a girl helping her mother, bake or cook, or sew, or whatever it is, or whether it's already an older woman taking care of her family. Most of the women would stay indoors. They would go out to the marketplace, and they would dress very modestly. And you can see in some Middle Eastern countries how some of the women are still dressed like that. They're not Jewish, but they believe in the same idea. It's not to draw attention, except for your husband. For your husband, you can show everything almost, right? I mean, you still have to be somewhat modest, but just pretty much he can see. But not anybody else. There's certain parts of the body that have to be covered up. And here's this woman who's not dressed modestly, who looks like a zunah, because that's how they learn. They don't dress modestly. And she has an impudent heart. What does it mean that she has an impudent heart? In the way that she talks, and that's what the next pasuk says, Homiyahi v'soraret beveta lo yishkenu ragleha. She is loud and stubborn. She has a big mouth, in other words. She's not quiet. Not only is she not modest, but she's loud. She speaks openly what's on her mind. Her feet do not remain in her house. She's always running around everywhere. So she's not modest in her dress code. She's not modest in the way she talks, in the way she acts, where she goes around. In other words, all around her behavior shows a lack of modesty. Or as what the rabbis would call her, she's a yatzanit. Yatzanit meaning she's always going out. And the Midrash tells us that this is how Dinah got into trouble. Dinah, the daughter of Yaakov, that she went out to check all the girls out of the neighborhood. And who saw her? Shem ben Hamor. And then you know the rest of the story. So this woman, how do you recognize her? He's giving us signs of how to identify her. She's loud. She is showy. She doesn't dress properly. She's always going around outside. She's not modest, not reserved. Not your normal modest woman. And therefore you can tell when you see these signs, be careful. She talks too loud. She's very showy. She's not modest. Maybe she's as they call it in English, forgive me, a slut. Is that a bad word? No.
It's descriptive.
It's descriptive, yeah. Well, as long as people understand what it means. Yeah. It couldn't be worse than a zonah, right? And anyway, and that's the word used. And there are women like that who, because of their behavior, because of the way they talk, because of the way they present themselves, that's what they're basically demonstrating. Keep away from them. Pam b'chutz, pam b'rechovot, v'etzel kol pinat herov. Here we have the one that doesn't stay quiet. She's going out to catch someone. So she's outside now in the streets and lies in wait at every corner. She wants to ambush someone. She wants to get someone. There are people like that, believe it or not. I was unaware of it. I, of course, minded my own business when I was at work with the Goyim. But there are individuals like that. And I had to ask people who are a little bit more informed about what does this mean and what does that mean. Are they trying to say something? Because I was very innocent. And I still don't know what people mean, because that's not my area, Baruch Hashem, that I have to figure out what people are trying to say. I just keep away. And they know that, I keep my distance. I barely talk to them, talk about the non-Jewish women. And so they don't approach as much. But you have these that have chutzpah. There are some like that who would do almost anything, including some of the following details. What's the following detail after there is an encounter between them? She finally meets up with him, he meets up with her, and she's of course the one that's initiating now. She's after him, after the young man, after the one who's a simple man, who's unaware of what's about to happen. והחזיקה בו ונשקה לו, העזה פניה ותאמר לו. She holds on to him, she kisses him, and with an impudent face, she says to him, and we'll see what she says to him next. So what's happening over here? Physical contact. All it is holding on, maybe a handshake. Handshake, what's a handshake? But it's physical contact. And a lot of Jews do not know that when they're going on dates. You cannot touch, you cannot hold hands before you were married to each other. Even if you're engaged, you cannot have any physical contact. It's a sur. Not only is it a sur, but if there is physical contact, what will come next? Well, all it is a handshake. And many of the French and some South American have a problem. Even though they're married, every time they greet another woman, they have to kiss her on both cheeks, by the way. One is not enough.
And the men.
And the men too, yeah. But the men is not the end of the world. Yeah, it's the women. And by the way, if you're a Muslim, you kiss 3 times. Right, left, and right again. I don't know why. Just in case the first time around was not good enough, maybe. Yeah. Or what I really think sometimes is that they really want to spit in your face, but they don't, so they kiss. I don't know. Maybe that's what they do. Because we're talking about people who don't like each other doing that. So what's the kiss for? You know, a kiss is something very, very spiritual, something very, very special, and something that there's different kinds of kisses. There's a kiss of goodbye. There's a kiss when somebody is elevated to a new position, to a high position, like a king. There's a kiss between relatives. There's a kiss between a husband and a wife. The Zohar speaks about what a kiss is and what it represents. When the spirits combine, especially if it's through the mouth, not just in the cheek, it has great significance. But people misuse it. People do not understand it. And it's something very, very special if you really understand what it is and if it's used properly amongst the people who can use this way of communicating intimacy or affection. But that's what happens initially, is there's physical contact which is forbidden. Not only is it forbidden, but it could lead to worse problems. But that's what she does. Why? She's chatzufa, she's impudent, she doesn't care. And what does he say? He says, oh, I'm not going to just let her go because it will look bad. She put out her hand to me. I had to shake it. How would it look if I hold my hand back? That's what a lot of people say. Just say, I'm sorry, I'm religious. I can't shake your hand. Nothing against you. Sometimes it's very, very hard. You just get caught and just put your hand out loosely and let her do all the squeezing. If you want.
Share the glove on.
Makes nothing, even if there's a glove. Right? Remember we talked about siyagim? Say, I'm sorry. Or just do what the Japanese do. Just bow your head.
Yeah.
And then you're really out of it. You have no problem. Yes. Yeah? Yeah, but it's worse if Hashem gets insulted, isn't it? Right. Shah says, I'm sorry, I'm a religious woman. Yeah, and by the way, I'm married, you can say too. Yeah. You can't worry about everybody being insulted. Most people will actually understand. Most people would. It's very few that get insulted. Yeah, but remember, we're more concerned with what Hashem will say than what other people will say anyway. We want to do the right thing. So this is a big problem, this area of physical contact. We want to avoid that, but that's what may happen at some point. And she will not let go. She's impudent. And we're talking about, therefore, not only more about the physical contact, we're talking about watching one's mouth, watching one's clothing. Women, Jewish women especially, have to be careful what they say, what language they use, because the language could also lead to the other individual having the wrong ideas. We have to be very careful with the words we use. So after she meets up with him and she touches him and she grabs onto him, what does she tell him? The next pasuk, Zivchei shelamim alai hayom shilamti nedarai. I have had to sacrifice peace offerings this day. I have paid my vows. In other words, I'm throwing a big party. I have a big meal. When we had korbanot, sacrifices, we had korban shilamim. The korban shilamim was a sacrifice that the owners could partake of. They could eat from. That's why Shlomo Melech uses this as an example. I paid my vows. Now why does he use that in conjunction with neder? Because she may come across as a woman who's a tzedeket. You see? I do mitzvot too. I just kept my vows. I'm throwing a big party. Why don't you come and join me? I'm having a big meal. And Shlomo Melech is telling us that, by the way, this is just a big lie. It's just an excuse to get you into the house. She may say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't have time some other day when I met you because I was busy with my neder. Or the interpretation of this passage could just be that she's lying to you about this big party that she has, and in fact all she wants from you is to spend some time with her. So she says, I'm doing all of this for you. But in reality, it's because I had a neder to pay, so why don't you just come and join me? The rabbis tell us that when a woman says these kind of things, in other words, talking about her vows, her nedarim, she's trying to take credit, lefa'eret ma'aseh, to be proud of all her accomplishments, of her good deeds, to cover up what she's about to do that is not so good. So therefore, in order to cover up something that's not too good, she talks about all the good things she does. I'm paying off my vows. I'm bringing this korban shilamim. I'm preparing this big meal to be thankful to Hashem. Where in reality, all she's doing is covering up her bad deeds. And that is the way sotot, women who are not modest, women who do these terrible things. That's the way they do things. That's the way they conduct themselves. They talk like that, they say things, they give excuses, and they lie just to cover up their deeds. And therefore, she says, Al ken yatzati likratecha leshaher panecha v'emtzaeka. And that is why I came forth to meet you, diligently to seek your face, and I have found you. In other words, I was looking all over the place for you, because I want to share this meal with you. I prepared something for you. And all of this is a lie. In other words, these women may do almost anything just to get this individual to come over. Put up a big meal and some other things too. Just to convince the guy that, everything is for him. But she has a whole agenda. Rabbis also tell us that this is the same tactic that the Yetzer Hara uses. But the Yetzer Hara can sometimes work through a mitzvah. It tells a woman, today you need to go to shul. It's a mitzvah to go to shul. It's Rosh Chodesh. But what's the real intention of the Yetzer Hara? He knows that this woman is a big talker and a big gossiper. If she enters that shul, she's going to talk to all the women. And maybe the men later too. So how does he get her to shul? Today is Rosh Chodesh. You got to go to the shul. Or today is some other major event. So sometimes the Yetzer Hara uses a mitzvah to get an individual to do an avirah. You have to be careful. This is the tactics. Just like this woman will use some tactic to get this man to come over her house. Marvadim ravati arsi hatuvot etun mitzrayim. I have decked my bed with coverings, with tapestry of fine linen from Egypt. That's approximately the translation. She's describing right now something more intimate. Her beds, her linen. Nafti mishkavi mor ahalim v'kinamon. And I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Now, the conversation is taking another turn. It's becoming more intimate. She's already describing more detail about her home. And what's her goal here is to get him convinced, to get him interested. Oh, good smells, something beautiful, something nice and comfortable, and getting his curiosity even more piqued. So she's pulling him along, and that is the next step, to show him around, to show him everything. And now she comes to her final goal. Now she reveals to him the real agenda. Lechan nirve dodim ad haboker nit'allesa ba'ahavim. Come, let us take our fill of love until the morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. In other words, let's spend the time or the night together. How can we do that? No problem. For my husband is not at home. He has gone a long journey. Don't worry about it. He's not coming home so fast. He's away in a long journey, and therefore you have nothing to worry about. Now what's interesting about here is that a normal woman, according to the Torah, does not ask even her husband that she wants to be with him. She insinuates. That is the derech, that is the way of a modest Jewish woman at least, that she insinuates, she dresses up, she shows her husband that she's eager, that she wants his time and his affection, and etc. The man, of course, is the one that usually initiates. The man is the one who has to pay attention and be sensitive to his wife's needs. But for the woman to openly ask her husband something, as regarding an intimate relationship, is not seen amongst the more observant Jewish circles. It's chutzpah. It's impudent. It's not correct. But here we see just the opposite. Yes.
You describing the man like no willpower, no savoir-faire, no nothing.
Right. We're talking about two individuals, right? Two kinds of men.
Yeah.
Especially he's focusing on the simple and the young, the unexperienced. Yeah, you're right. But no, there are men. But what was my introduction? My introduction was that this is one area where even the strongest, the most confident of people, the most angelic, have fallen in this trap. So you're right, there are many people, Baruch Hashem, who are self-confident, who know to maintain their distance, or who do not even have this interest. People who do not sin do not do it for the following reasons. They're embarrassed, or they don't want to hurt their wives, or they're very religious and they don't want to hurt Hashem's feelings, right? Or they're simply uninterested. There are many reasons why somebody will not want to fall into this trap, right? So we're generalizing here, especially with the young and those who are unexperienced, that this could happen to anyone, but especially to those who are simple and unaware of where this is leading to. But you're right. If somebody is strong, self-confident, experienced, and he already knows, he won't go for it. But you know what? Many people go for it. And that is what Shlomo Melech has to warn us. Be careful, don't think you're so smart. Because even the strongest have fallen. That's all he's saying.
Because she's not doing it alone, she's doing it because he's agreeing also.
Obviously, it takes two to tango. That's right. That's what they say. Yeah, but nevertheless, she's powerful. The woman is powerful. That's what Shlomo Melech is pointing out, and he has experience with women, I think. Right? He had quite a few wives. So he learned a lot. So therefore he's telling these young men, be careful, because she will try to lure you into her home, and then she will convince you that it's okay, there's nothing to be afraid, her husband is not home, and he's not coming back so quickly. Now listen to what he says. Shlomo Melech says that this woman does not like her husband. Why? Because she says, Ki en ha'ish beveto, the man is not at home. A woman who loves her husband would say, because my husband is not at home. I always tell kids, I see this too often, and I don't like it. They call their friends by their last name. Did you ever see this? Instead of calling him Moshe, Meir, Yuda, whatever, they call him, hey Friedman, hey Wolfson, hey Mizrahi. That shows a lack of affection towards the guy, a lack of interest, that you're using his last name instead of his first name. When you care about someone, you use his first name, because the first name identifies this individual. The last name identifies his big family. The reason why people use this, and I've told this to my kids too, is because either it's easier. One kid of mine told me, well, there's 3 Moshes in one class. I said, okay, that's justifiable, but still it's not right, because it creates distance. When you call somebody by his first name, it creates closeness. And that is why when people want to maintain a distance, they call Mr. So-and-so or Rabbi so-and-so, and they don't use this individual's first name. Because for some reason they don't want to have a certain closeness. That's fine when the closeness does not belong there.
More respectful.
Sure. Exactly. And because it's more respectful. Right, so there's a reason for that. But between friends, depending of course on the status of the friendship, but usually between friends, if it's permissible, obviously, then you would want to use the first name.
How about both together?
That's fine, both together too. So here she's not using her husband's name by her husband. The man is not home. In other words, obviously she's not interested in that. Is where she's capable of doing what she's about to do, commit a sin with another man. How does she convince him that he's gone and he's not coming home soon? She says, by the way, don't think he's going to change his mind and come home soon. He's taking the money with him. He has a big order. He has a lot of merchandise to buy, and the money's not here. He's taking his checkbook, in other words. He's not coming home so soon. Don't worry about it. He will only return at the designated time, Yom HaKeseh. And what happens at the end? At the end, of course, she may have convinced him. And at the end, with her pretty speech, she seduces him, and with her smooth talk, she compels him. What happens over here is, as the rabbis tell us, berov hergel. When somebody gets used to something, you hear something a lot, the pitui, the seduction, the temptation becomes stronger, and eventually it may win. And how did this all begin? As soon as we finish. How did this all begin? With diburim, just with talk. And talk is powerful. But when you talk and talk and talk and talk, when there's so much intensity, it gets the two people even closer and closer together. And how it begins with talk. And at the end, she compels him. In other words, she almost forces him. And whoever falls in this trap, whoever goes after her at once, it goes like an ox goes to the slaughter. And the last words of there's 2 interpretations. Some say it's like the poison of a snake that Hashem sends after one who has committed a sin to punish him. Or some say it's like the chaining a man. Either way, what happens to him is that he suddenly he loses control. He loses control. It's just like a bull going to the slaughter without realizing where he's ending up. He no longer has control. And it happens so suddenly. And what happens to him at the end? Until an arrow pierces his liver, like a bird rushes to the trap and knows not that it is for his life. In other words, at the end, even if the temptations are no longer there, he's already going by himself. He's done it once, become easy, now he does it on his own. No temptations are necessary. And in the end, he doesn't realize ki benafshohu, that this is affecting his life. He not only will catch many diseases, as we are seeing today, what's going on, but benafshohu means that this will affect his life. He might die prematurely as a result of this grave sin, especially if she's a married woman. But people do not realize because they get caught up in this. And that is why he says the next pasuk, ve'ata banim shimu li v'akshivu le'imrei fi. Listen to me now, my children, and attend to the words of my mouth. In other words, pay close attention to what I'm saying here. And remember these words. Don't get close to such an individual, even if her deeds are good. In other words, there might be somebody out there you might say, yeah, but she's a good woman, she's a good cook, she's a good, she takes care of the elderly, she has many good things that she does. Still, be careful, it's still a trap. It still can be a trap. It's a potential trap at least. You never know. Maybe she doesn't have any intention, but it could lead to one. And there have been stories of where nothing was intended in the beginning between the two of them, but it led to the breakdown of two families because these two people got involved and they shouldn't have gotten involved. And how did it all begin? With just exchange of words. But people do not know their limits, and even if they know their limits, they can get carried away unless they have some protection, and that is the Torah. So he says, pay attention to what I'm saying and remember these words, review these words. And the reason for reviewing these words is al yest vel derachea libecha al teta bentibotea. Don't let your heart decline to her ways and do not go astray in her paths. Ki rabim halalim hipila vatsumim kol harugea. For she has cast down many wounded, and many strong men have been slain by her. As we said in the very beginning, many strong people who were controlled their yetzer, who have good discipline and good self-control, in the end have fallen. The best and the strongest have fallen. And that is why he says, don't take your chance. Because if you take your chance, and I'm going to skip one pasuk and then come back to it, if you take your chance, darchei sheol beta yordot el chadrei mavet. Her house is the way to Sheol, to the grave, going down to the chambers of death. And what that means is that her way, her path, the path to her home is downhill. Now when somebody goes down to that house, to that woman, he might say, okay, I'm going to hold myself back now. Yeah, but you're already downhill. It's very hard to go back up. When you're already down, you just fall. It's very hard once you've gotten so low and so close to pull yourself back. So don't say, I'm going to just get close a little bit. I'm just going to shake your hand, but I'm not going to do more than that. No kissing, no embracing, nothing more than that. No, the shake of hand is already a big step, a dangerous step for the man. And for the woman, of course, if she does not dress properly, she's causing people to get close, to look, to become interested, and that leads to problems too. In the last pasuk that we just skipped, Kirabim halalim ipila vatsumim kol harugea, we spoke about those who were strong once upon a time and who have lost their control. But the rabbis tell us that it's also talking about an individual who never got semicha, never learned Torah, and he's giving classes to people. He shouldn't be. One who does not know Torah should not be teaching people that which he does not know. Kirabim halalim hipila, one can mislead a lot of people, cause them to go astray as a result of his misdirected instruction, misguided instruction. And the same applies to one who is capable of teaching and holds himself back from teaching. He too, it causes a tremendous sin by holding back all the valuable information that he has to help people. And finally, an additional interpretation of this pasuk is the ones who are osek b'Torah shelo lishma, those who study the Torah not for its real sake, but just because they want to have some degree or they want to have some title, they want to get some reputation, but they don't do it for its real sake. Obviously, whoever does not learn Torah for its real sake, the Torah turns to a poison, the rabbis tell us. Instead of it being a remedy, a medicine, a cure, a source of strength for him, it leads him astray, it causes him to do all sorts of things. And he's using the Torah as a weapon, in a sense, for the wrong things instead of for the good things. The Torah needs to be learned lishma. However, the rabbis tell us it's okay to learn it shelo lishma initially, just because you want to learn, because you're curious. Begin to learn so, because eventually, if you continue to learn shelo lishma, you will come to learn lishma. At least get started. But to regularly learn Torah shelo lishma, shelo leshem shamayim, is not good. It's dangerous. Finally, the lesson, what's the lesson of this chapter? The commentaries explain, the fortunate is the person who knows to maintain his distances in many areas, whether it's the area of kashrut, not to buy anything without proper supervision, whether it's the area of tzniut, of modesty, of how one dresses and how one talks, whether it's the area of what one sees, what one allows himself to see, and what one does not allow himself to see, like a TV, like certain magazines and newspapers. And fortunate is the person who gets closer to the chokhmah, associates himself with the chokhmah, with wisdom, attends regular classes, learns Torah, stays in touch with the rabbis, consults with the rabbis, and in this way will be able to spare himself from any trouble. One who is overconfident of himself and takes things into his hand, doesn't consult, thinks he knows everything, usually ends up making many mistakes, costly mistakes that in the end of his life may be too difficult to repair. So that is the idea of learning Torah on a regular basis for both men and women, but especially for the men who have the mitzvah of being kovei itim la Torah. Anyway, that is the strength of the Torah, that it gives us a tavlin, it gives us a remedy to be able to deal with the Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara is not only trying to lure us with women, which we talked about in this chapter. The Yetzer Hara tries to lure everyone according to what his weaknesses are. We all have different kinds of weaknesses. Some people have a problem with kavod. They love honor. Other people love money. Other people love food. Everybody has their own weakness. But regardless of the weakness, the Torah is a tavlin. It's a very powerful remedy. It's a source of strength. Besides the knowledge and the information, it gives us a tremendous amount of protection that B'ezrat Hashem will allow us to lead a good life, a healthy life, B'ezrat Hashem. Any questions? Yeah.
How come Shlomo knew so much about women?
He knew about women in general and about other trouble areas as well. Because this is one of the most dangerous and most powerful traps that exists. That's what the commentators explain. That's why he spends several chapters discussing this trap, this potential problem that even the best and the ones who had the most control have been seen to fall. And that is why he warns us ahead of time that this is a potential problem.
I'll get announced next week.
B'ezrat Hashem, next week, as you know, will be the shidduchim here for those who are still single, and there will be another speaker here.